The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. First, the lead stories. The Working People's Alliance says there must be a new voters list before the next local government elections. The Guyana Teachers Union says the process of licensing teachers is not a quick fix and cannot be implemented immediately in Guyana. The international global energy consultancy firm Rystad Energy estimates that Guyana will earn around $130 billion in oil revenues over the next 20 years. And in regional news, Jamaican authorities believe they have found a way to go after unlicensed public transportation vehicles and fight abductions. And for the international news, we'll be bringing to you the latest from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. The Working People's Alliance, WPA, says there must be a new voters list before the next local government elections. Recently appointed Chief Elections Officer Vishnu Prasad has said that local government elections can be held next year, but the WPA says that at a minimum, these elections should be held with a brand new voters list. That party says that this should be the bottom line for all forces concerned with transparent elections. According to the WPA, there can be no democratic elections with a list as bloated as the current one. The WPA flayed the governing People's Progressive Party for not including the creation of a new voters list as part of its proposal on electoral reform. The WPA says it intends to join with other forces in the struggle for a new voters list and give the Guyana Elections Commission the power to determine the timetable for elections by consensus rather than solely by the government. The elections for neighborhood and town councils should have been held this year. However, they were not held because the Elections Commission had terminated the services of the Chief and Deputy Chief Elections Officers and the Region 4 Returning Officer. The Guyana Teachers Union, GTU, says the process of licensing teachers is not a quick fix and that it cannot be implemented immediately in Guyana. In an invited comment by News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM via telephone, President of the GTU, Mark Light, says there are several issues that must be worked out before the system can work in Guyana. The GTU president says, first, there must be an equal standard of operating in all schools, which is not the case. Mr. Light pointed to different standards of operations of teachers and schools in Georgetown, on the coast, and the hinterland. The GTU president says a licensing process cannot now be used to evaluate all teachers operating under different circumstances. He says there is a need for a standard form of appraisal for teachers and consultations with all stakeholders. Mr. Light says arriving at the stage to license teachers is a long process which the GTU does not foresee happening in a few weeks or months. He says while the GTU is aware of the system being used in other countries, those countries have a standard by which all their schools operate, which is where Guyana needs to be first before considering licensing teachers. The international global energy consultancy firm, Rystad Energy, estimates that Guyana will earn around $130 billion in oil revenues over the next 20 years. Head of Latin America research at Rystad Energy, Skriner Parker, gives this projection based on if the already discovered estimated 10 billion barrels of oil equivalent are extracted. Nearly half of Guyana's 750,000 persons live on an average of $6 per day. But University of Guyana economist Dr. Thomas Singh has told the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation that he is not sure that Guyana can handle all of that oil wealth. He is also skeptical, saying that it is difficult to say this bonanza will transform Guyana into a developed nation. ExxonMobil Guyana says that the company has had a safe year of operations in line with its commitment to nobody gets hurt. Recalling the safety performance for the year, President of ExxonMobil, Alistair Routledge, disclosed that there were hundreds of days across offshore operations without a recordable safety incident. He says the crew on board the Liza Destiny FPSO, for instance, has reached more than 800 days without a recordable incident. There are 6 drill ships and now 2 floating production storage and offloading vessels in the Stabroek Block offshore Guyana, which are supported by more than 1,000 persons at any given time. ExxonMobil Guyana has recorded multiple discoveries in the Stabroek Block in 2021, which increased the recoverable resource estimate to approximately 10 billion oil equivalent barrels. The company currently produces more than 120,000 barrels of oil per day from the Liza Destiny oil-producing vessel, while the flare is maintained at regulatory required levels. The Ministry of Health continues to record average positive COVID cases, but is seeing a decline in overall active cases. The Minister of Health, Dr. Frank Anthony.
We have right now 28 persons in hospitals across Guyana, with 21 of those persons being in the Ocean View Hospital. Of the 21 that we have at the Ocean View Hospital, 5 of those persons are in the ICU. We currently have 741 cases that are active across the country, with 32 new cases over the last 24 hours. And of the 741 cases that we currently have, 386 of those cases are in Region 4, with 162 being in Region 6. We also have 85 cases in Region 3 and 29 cases in Region 10.
The health minister pleaded with persons who are unvaccinated and those who have taken 1 dose to be fully vaccinated, as he detailed the number of COVID vaccines administered.
Overall in the country, we would have administered 764,898 vaccines as a total amount of vaccines that we have given. If we break that down, we would have given 440,072 doses as a first dose vaccine. Second dose vaccine would have been 314,356. So these numbers are really for persons 12 years and older. And we have started to administer booster doses. We're now at 10,470 booster doses.
The ministry has recorded 2 unvaccinated deaths, which pushes the COVID death toll to 1,042. And now in regional news. The Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Philip Davis, is in quarantine. Our Bahamas News reports that he decided to go into quarantine after coming into contact with a number of COVID-19 infected relatives. He says that the government has since intensified preparations as the Omicron variant continues to spread globally. Here are details from Jasmine Brown.
The Prime Minister using his family situation to point out just how dire the COVID situation has become seemingly overnight as he asks Bahamians to act responsibly this holiday season. COVID cases have doubled and tripled over the last few days. On Thursday, the Bahamas recorded 140 cases, up from 79 cases recorded the day before. The Davis family has been impacted as well following a family gathering.
Last weekend, we had a family gathering, which included several family members who traveled here from abroad. Even though everyone was vaccinated and everyone tested negative before travel, several of those who were visiting from abroad tested positive on the 5th day after arrival in the country. Since then, my wife and other family members have tested positive. I remain negative. Because they were vaccinated, they are either asymptomatic or are experiencing only mild symptoms. I'm so grateful that is the case.
As cases climb, Davis said effective immediately, rules related to gatherings will be tightened.
We are changing the rules about the size of gatherings that are permitted. Indoor gatherings should not have more than 20 people. Outdoor gatherings no more than 30.
Travel rules will also change.
Bahamians and visitors must test negative within 3 days of entering the country instead of 5. And beginning on January 7th, a negative PCR test will be required for all.
Davis says the government is continuing to progress with free COVID testing and is getting ready to mobilize multiple field hospitals should hospitalizations spike. He says plans are underway to utilize the nursing school and the National Stadium, and the government is in discussions with an international partner to open a field hospital in Grand Bahama. In the meantime, he says Bahamians should prepare for the worst. Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General, Faraz Al-Rawi, says he has told trade unions that the government will not back down from its vaccination policy. Details from TNT News Online.
Mr. Roger very plainly and very frankly informed me that the unions, as he spoke for them, do not trust the government, do not trust the Prime Minister, and do not trust the data.
Attorney General Faraz Al-Rawi says despite many unions being present at a meeting to discuss government's impending policy on vaccinations for public sector workers, Joint Trade Union Movement leader Ansel Roger was the lone voice that had 2 demands of government.
1, withdraw its policy, and 2, provide empirical evidence that the vaccines will stop people from getting COVID and stop infections.
However, Mr. Al-Rawi said government's position was clear and pointed out that the vaccine does not prevent someone from getting COVID, but reduces the dependency on hospitals.
The government's policy, quite simply, its sole and primary purpose is to save lives. The data before us is that 9 out of 10 people in the ICU unit are unvaccinated.
The Attorney General confirmed that government's policy would not require support from the opposition.
I am confident that it is of course a rights issue. It is a constitutional issue. It does not require a special majority.
He added that the unions did not want to talk about anything other than withdrawing the policy and had no recommendations with regards to a way forward. The AG said he is pleading with the unions to provide suggestions on the issue and is hopeful that the unions will provide a response.
The several trade unions which Mr. Roger spoke for and on behalf of have not given the country, let alone the government, any form of recommendation as to how to treat with the reality of Omicron and COVID Omicron in today's world.
Sonolala, TTT News.
The government of Belize has decided to push back the date for the reopening of its land borders and seaports. According to Loop News, the government says, based on the formal recommendations of the COVID-19 Advisory Committee, the opening of the land borders and seaports has been postponed to February 2022. The government had initially announced that the land borders would be reopened on New Year's Day. The government says the delay in reopening will allow for the health system to better prepare for the emergence of the Omicron variant, as well as to prepare for the education system's return to hybrid learning on January 10, 2022. The Ministry of Health and Wellness says it will continue to monitor the situation very closely to ensure the integrity of Belize's health system and the welfare of Belizeans. Users of public transportation in Jamaica can now access information about vehicles to ascertain whether they are registered. As we hear in this report from CVN News, passengers can also alert the Jamaica Transportation Authority if there are fake registrations, and police and relatives can be provided information to track down vehicles.
Amid never-ending fears of abduction, which at times turns deadly, an app expected to ensure safer transportation, the Travel Pal app. Developed at a cost of $2.3 million, the app will enable passengers to use their mobile device to scan the registration plates of public passenger vehicles, PPV, to verify if they are licensed by the Transport Authority. Also included in the app is a critical component called the button, which will allow passengers to send a signal to the Jamaica Constabulary Force's 119 Emergency Center, as well as their loved ones in the event of an emergency.
So it is important to us that our passengers are aware of the difference between a legal operator and an illegal one. The Transport Authority is pleased to participate in the development and execution of the Travel Pal application, which we believe will revolutionize the transportation sector.
While addressing the issue of abductions, the head of the JCF's Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch, PSTEB, believes the Travel Pal app will remove the stigma attached to some official taxi operators.
This travel app, it is indeed a very good thing for these official taxi operators so that we can get rid of the perceptions, we can zoom in on the realities, and most of all, to ensure that we protect members of the public.
Transport and Mining Minister Robert Montague is urging citizens to download the app from the Apple Store and on Android devices from the Google Play Store. Aladdin Love for CVM Live.
And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Neil Nunes with the BBC News. At least 37 people have been killed after a packed ferry caught fire in southern Bangladesh. Officials said the blaze on the three-decked vessel started in mid-river near the town of Jalakati as it made its way from the capital Dhaka towards the southern town of Barguna. From Dhaka, here's Abkar Hossain.
The fire broke out in the ferry at 3 o'clock in the morning when most of the passengers were sleeping. More than 500 people were on board. Officials say that the fire may have started in the engine room. Many people jumped into the river to escape the flames and some of them drowned. The number of casualties is likely to increase as many of the passengers have suffered severe burns. Ferry accidents are very common in Bangladesh as safety standards are often ignored. Hundreds of people have died in similar tragedies over the last 10 years, but no one has been held to account.
Police in northern India have launched an investigation into alleged hate speech by Hindu fundamentalists in Uttarakhand state. They're looking into videos showing inflammatory speeches given in the city of Haridwar, as our South Asian regional editor Anbarasaneti Rajan explains.
The controversial event by a group of Hindu radicals was held earlier this month in the northern Indian state of Uttarakhand. Some of the participants openly called for violence against the country's Muslim minority. The comments have sparked widespread outrage and anger on social media. Critics say many of the speakers are often seen in the company of ministers and members of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist BJP. The incident comes amid a series of Hindu vigilante attacks on churches and Christian prayer halls in different parts of India. In recent years, Hindu extremist groups have stepped up their calls to declare India to be a Hindu nation.
The former South Korean President Park Geun-hye is to be granted a presidential pardon. Ms. Park was impeached and removed from office in 2017 and subsequently jailed for 22 years on corruption charges. Our correspondent in Seoul, Laura Baker, says not everyone is happy about the decision.
And I've seen a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of accusations of betrayal. Remember, millions of South Koreans took to the streets back in 2016. She became the first president to be impeached for corruption and bribery. She went on in 2017 to be charged for those offences. And for many here in South Korea, she represents the corruption between the presidential office and wealthy family-run conglomerates here in South Korea. Something that they had hoped to put in the past and something the current president, Moon Jae-in, had promised to root out.
World News from the BBC. A court in Uganda has charged 15 people, including a pregnant woman, with terrorism over their alleged role in recent bomb attacks that killed several people in the capital, Kampala, and elsewhere in the country. Most of the defendants were charged with membership of the militant group Allied Democratic Forces, which is accused of having carried out the bombings. Hun Manet, the eldest son of Cambodia's veteran Prime Minister Hun Sen, has received the unanimous endorsement of the ruling party to be a future prime ministerial candidate. His father, who's governed the one-party state for 36 years, signaled his support for his son's candidacy earlier this month. Japan says it will not be sending government officials to the Beijing Winter Olympics in February, but it stopped short of joining the small U.S.-led diplomatic boycott of the Games. A government spokesman, Hirokazu Matsuno, said the head of the Japanese Olympic Committee and the woman in charge of the Tokyo Games, Seiko Hashimoto, would lead the Japanese delegation.
Japan believes it's important for China to guarantee the universal values of freedom, respect for basic human rights, and the rule of law, which are universal values in the international community. We are working directly with the Chinese side at various levels. As the Tokyo Games have shown, the Olympic and Paralympic Games are a festival of peace and sports that give courage to the world.
A much-anticipated new film retelling the Indian cricket team's memorable victory in the 1983 World Cup has been released. The film, titled 83, features the Bollywood superstar Ranveer Singh as Kapil Dev, one of the finest all-rounders of the game. Led by Dev, the Indian team were rank outsiders, but ended up beating the mighty West Indies in a stunning victory. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return-to-work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, which results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
To end the news, here is a recap of the lead stories. The Working People's Alliance says there must be a new voters list before the next local government elections. The Guyana Teachers Union says the process of licensing teachers is not a quick fix and cannot be implemented immediately in Guyana. The international global energy consultancy firm Rystad Energy estimates that Guyana will earn around $130 billion in oil revenues over the next 20 years. And in regional news, Jamaican authorities believe they have found a way to go after unlicensed public transportation vehicles and fight abductions. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.